A lot of businesses approach content with a if you build it, he will come approach. In other words, they think that if they're producing content, traffic will naturally follow. But it's not always that simple. Sometimes you might be publishing tons of content, but seeing the numbers you care about, namely traffic, leads, and sales, stay flat. If this sounds like you, you're in the right place, because today on Solving Inbound, we're going to be addressing the question, we're writing content, so why aren't we seeing our numbers go up? Welcome back, everyone, to Solving Inbound. I'm John Becker here with Connor Delaney, answering all of the questions that are pressing for any business doing inbound marketing. And I think, Connor, this is a big one. People want an answer. They're producing the content, and why are the numbers not moving?
Yeah, there's a lot of frustration that comes with this question. There's, a lot of people want to see immediate results. And that's not only a common misconception with most things in life, but with content in particular and with inbound marketing in particular, people really struggle with having to play the long game a little bit. And we're going to address some of those key touch points and some of the quick wins that you can create through not only to get traffic, but to get results, period, as you mentioned earlier.
I'm going to try to butcher a quote from Bill Gates. And I know the real quote, but I'm going to do it as it applies to traffic, which is most people overestimate what they can do in a month and underestimate what they can do in a year. If you commit, and I think that'll be our big message today, believe in the principles, commit. There are things you have to tweak and adjust and do better. But if you believe in the principles and commit to them over the long haul, the results will follow. But Connor, I think we are both starting off in the same place, which is reminding people, first off, ranking does not happen overnight.
Yeah, when we look at the ranking of content, we think we want to be at the top of Google. We want to be on page one. We want to get that featured snippet. Unfortunately, Google doesn't just say, oh, you've just published this piece of content. Yeah, we're going to send you to the top. You've got to earn your way there. And typically earning your way there takes time. It's not really, in the past. And funny enough, we talked about this with Kevin Church, who is probably going to come up a little bit later too. But when we had Kevin Church on as a guest here on Solving Inbound, we brought up, you can't just word smash things into articles anymore. People used to just, keyword loading, I think was probably stuffing, a better way of saying it. Yeah, keyword stuffing. You can't just do that anymore to get to the top of Google. Google's much more sophisticated. And so it typically takes somewhere between 2 and 4 months, depending on the competitiveness of the term. If you're trying to rank for something, let's say inbound marketing, you're going to run up against a whole lot of competition in trying to get on that. But that's where the opportunities of some longer tail keywords can come into play, where you may be able to win people that maybe terms that are getting searched 100,000 times versus 100 million times. But that timeline of 2 to 4 months tends to be frustrating for people. And it's like going to the gym, right? You go to the gym, you get sore after going 2 or 3 times that week. And you're like, man, I feel like I should have all the muscles in the world. I should be losing weight like crazy. And you hop on the scale and it says that you've lost 3 pounds. And you get frustrated, you get discouraged. And that can be frustrating for people. But if you stick with that for 2 to 4 months, the results are going to come pretty quickly after that. And after those 2 to 4 months, it's going to build momentum and you're going to see them faster and faster and faster.
Great point. Right. Everyone always, you want to lose weight quickly, but you didn't gain weight quickly. You gained weight very slowly. So you have to lose it slowly as well. I pulled up an example that just to illustrate exactly what you're saying, Connor. So this is from an article that I wrote, and I wrote it in January. And I want to read these numbers off to people so you can picture this.
Everybody take notes.
Organic traffic first month, 42. Organic traffic second month, 163. Organic traffic third month, 581. Organic traffic fourth month, 1438. Organic traffic fifth month, 2330. So that's exactly what you're saying. But it's also important to remember that after that, it fell off and it started going down again. And then it fluctuates a little bit. And then we historically optimized it. And it's, now hovers around I don't know, a few 500 or 600 hits per month. And that's true of a lot of content. It's rarely just straight up. It will grow, but those numbers, they might not, there might be seasonality. There might be new competition for a certain keyword. There are lots of factors that are going into it, but certainly it does not happen overnight. And a big factor that we talked about before we started recording, Connor, is Google has to crawl your site in order to recognize that you have new content. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the act of site crawling is basically, imagine the spider analogy. We have the World Wide Web, and you've got a million little creepy crawlies going around on the website, but there's only so many of these little spiders crawling around, going on the infinite amount of websites being created and updated and optimized every day. So Google can only send so many resources around. And so they're going to prioritize the resources they know are getting regularly updated. So whether you have a brand new website or you have a website that you haven't used for a while, Google's typically not going to say that you are the most important thing for them to send their millions of creepy crawlies around to. So instead, they're going to say, we'll get to you at some point. And a common hiccup or speed bump that we see for a lot of people is that they don't actually know if their site's being crawled or not. Now, if you have a brand new website, or if you're working through a service like WordPress or HubSpot, they typically help with building what we call a sitemap, so that Google understands how to crawl it. But if you're not seeing results and you're not seeing traffic, somewhere to start is to make sure that Google's actually looking at your website. And there's a couple different ways that crawling works. You can either crawl the entire website, which says, look at every single URL on our site and get everything. That takes a little bit longer and can sometimes take up to like a week or two to process, depending on your ranking, obviously. The other way, and this may be more important for those of us that are looking to get some of our blog content crawled, is you can submit a request for a site crawl through something like Google Search Console, and you can tell them to crawl an individual link. So you just wrote an amazing piece of content and you want Google to see that as soon as possible. As soon as you publish it to your site, if you want to make sure that it moves quickly, you can hop into Google Search Console, enter the URL of that blog, and they can go crawl just that individual URL. You don't have to tell them crawl everything, just that individual one. You can actually do that up to 10 times a day. And that will allow you to 10 individual URLs per day, rather. And that's how you can start to speed up making sure that Google sees your content more consistently. And over time, Google's going to naturally do that.
Absolutely. But we also want to remember, just because it crawled your site does not mean, it helps the process move forward. It starts the ball rolling. It doesn't mean that great blog.
Yeah, it's not going to shoot you to the top of Google.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
They're not clearing the whole way of the internet just to get you up there.
Right. But they get you in circulation, right? And that can start the process. And typically for newer sites in particular, or for sites that haven't produced a lot of content or aren't regularly updating their website anyway, that can help speed up that process just a little bit and get the ball rolling, like you said. And
the other thing you said, Connor, is it has to be quality content. Right? Yeah, if someone clicks 100%. On your content through a Google search and then bounces right back to the search results because they didn't like what they found or it wasn't accurate, it wasn't helpful, that's going to deprioritize your content in Google's ranking algorithm. But if someone clicks in and stays and spends time on your page, then that's going to boost your content in Google search algorithm. So quality always wins, and that's really important, which leads us into our second topic of the day. You might be writing lots of content, but you might not be writing the right stuff. And we talk to businesses all the time who say, like, I don't know what to write about, or I'm writing, why isn't it working? A lot of times they're not really writing the content that their buyers want to read. Maybe they're writing more fluffy content, more self-serving content, things that we've talked about on this program before. We shared an anecdote of an insurance company that had written an article about the top state parks for a Memorial Day barbecue or something like that. And it got tons of traffic. I know that's a little bit of a different challenge, but the same idea holds true. But none of that traffic became leads or sales because those people weren't looking to buy insurance. And if content is fluffy, if content doesn't resonate with your audience, you could be writing all the articles in the world and nobody would want to read it.
Right. Then no one's going to have interest. And to that point too, we put, so bringing back what you mentioned with site crawling, if Google goes and crawls your website and it's a press release about an award that you won, and I think we used this example in that same episode that you're referencing. If you won an award and Google crawls that, it's very limited what Google's going to actually present, like who that Google's going to present that article to, because most people aren't actually looking for that. Like, it sounds great, it looks great, it qualifies you as someone who's winning an award, but when you think about the customer journey, like, they're going to Google, they're not going to search, awards won by Impact.
Connor Delaney.
Yeah, or won by Connor Delaney, right? They're going to look for things that are actually relevant to them, not relevant to your company. And most of the customer journey starts where they're at this unawareness stage. And instead, they're going to be searching for, what is my problem? What is the thing I need to know more about? What potential solutions are out there? They want to educate themselves on what the options even are.
Right.
And
how much
that's
do those
how they're
solutions
going to
cost?
Yeah, right. And so when the fluffy content gets in the way, it's really hard for Google to say, this is actually important for this person who's looking for XYZ service or product. Instead, Google's looking for who's answering the right question, or answering those questions the best. And that's how you're going to win ranking. And that's how, when your blog gets crawled, it's not just saying, was it published yesterday? It's saying, is it relevant? And that's the most important thing. Once it crawls it, you fall into this relevance vortex that most people don't understand fully how Google works and how that algorithm works, because it's so complicated. But somehow they're producing the most valuable answers to any question or query that goes into Google. And those fluffy topics do not do so. On the flip side, you write content like you mentioned, cost articles, or what we've mentioned in the they ask you answer context of big five content. When you're answering the 5 most common and pressing questions a buyer has, you're naturally going to end up in front of more people, and more traffic is going to come out of that. And eventually more leads and more sales are going to come out of that.
Yeah, love it. So first thing we said was make sure that Google is actually crawling your site. Remember that ranking takes time. Second, we talked about make sure you're writing about the right stuff that's actually going to resonate with your audience. Third is it is important to keep search engine optimization in mind. And there are a few, we're not going to get into this in great depth. We had a whole episode about SEO and what you need to know. But keep in mind the best practices. Keep in mind that you need to be checking the basic boxes, things like your page needs to have a clear hierarchy with, H1s, H2s, H3s. So it's organized. So it's easy for both your readers and for Google to understand. Make sure you're writing a headline that's not clickbaity. It's clear, it's enticing, it brings people in. Make sure your page loads quickly. So optimizing your images so they're not huge and take forever to load. Make sure you're interlinking between articles, and that anchor text is clearly is illustrative of what you're actually linking to. And we could go on. And as I said, we have a whole episode devoted to SEO, and you can find tons of resources online. It mostly comes down to writing good quality, but there are those important checkboxes to just make sure that you're doing them so that you're giving both your readers and search engines the best, easiest, smoothest experience they can possibly have.
Yeah. And when we're thinking about the focus of traffic, which is at the core of this episode, traffic comes when that user experience is good. And yes, we're focused on, I think a lot about the technical side of content, of how do we get ourselves to rank a little bit higher? What heading tweaks? How can we do the little SEO things so that Google or your preferred search engine like it? At the same time, if a user is, and John, you brought up this example earlier, if a user is landing on your website and they're clicking through and they're staying on your site for several minutes and they came through that blog article or piece of content, Google's going to say, oh, this must be valuable because they're spending more time on the site. They're exploring further into the site instead of clicking in, spending 3 to 5 seconds on the page, realizing it doesn't answer your question and leaving. And that comes down to not only basic SEO, but basic user experience and basic, formatting and page layouts to make it easy for a user to want to explore the site and continue to be a repeating visitor later on.
Yeah, great point. So lastly, Connor, I think it's important to talk to our audience and our listeners and remind them that traffic isn't always necessarily the only way to evaluate how useful a piece of content is for your business and is for your audience.
Correct. When we coach companies on creating content, we typically start with saying, create what we call assignment selling or sales enablement content. And the reason that we say to create that first is because that's how you're going to see immediate results within your sales process. When you can start to use content that maybe isn't going to be super traffic driving, but is going to help you close some deals, it's going to naturally start to build momentum because you're sending that over to people, but it also is driving other results that maybe in the long run are more important to your business. You want to be creating content that your customers actually want to read, and that's going to help them be a more educated buyer and say, this company is the one that I want to buy from. If you're spending your time just writing traffic articles, imagine, again, the insurance example you brought up earlier of the top state parks to visit. If nobody's converting and nobody's actually interested in it being you that wrote that, and instead it's just, oh, I got my information, I'll never come back because I don't need that. That's not actually driving value for your organization. Instead, that's driving unqualified traffic. And even if they filled out a form, they're most likely not interested in actually working with you. They may just want to know more about parks.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, Connor, I think we are addressing something that feels really, it's a very common frustration for a lot of people out there. And at Impact, at our clients, we're always asking these questions. Why isn't this article doing better? Why isn't this video doing better in YouTube? And so it's important to acknowledge that your process can always get better. It's, none of these things that we've talked about today is a silver bullet that's going to completely get your content immediately to the top of search results. It's about principles and it's about committing to them. It can always feel frustrating when things don't deliver the results you're expecting or not on the timeline you're expecting. But when you commit to producing content at a steady clip, when you commit to answering buyer questions, which is naturally the content that's going to get searched for, found, read, shared, bookmarked, etc. When you commit to the basic best practices of SEO, good results will follow. If there's a quote that I was trying to look up before we started filming today, Connor. It's something to the effect of, if you have good principles, time is not your enemy, it's your friend. All you have to do is wait and kind of reap the benefits of those good principles. So when you're doing the right things, it can be frustrating if results don't come sooner, but they will come. They will come. They will come. And in the short term, we're not saying stop writing traffic producing content, but you should really put an emphasis on the content, the buyer's guides, the articles, the comparison pieces that your sales team can hand to prospects to help them move forward in the buying process. That's a way that content can influence your bottom line today. You could write something today and give it to your sales team today and have an effect immediately. So don't just think of content as something that's very top of the funnel and going to drive some brand awareness and people to your website. It can be used on the other end of the buyer's journey as well to move people forward and to get them to sign on the dotted line.
Well said, John.
Thanks, Connor. Thanks everybody for listening. So this is another episode of Solving Inbound, addressing the most pressing questions of businesses out there doing inbound marketing. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment below, click subscribe for all of our content. And if you have a specific challenge that you face with marketing, leave us a comment.
Let's hear it. We got a form down below too. If you want to have a future topic of conversation that you'd like John and I to discuss, maybe bring on a guest for, make sure that you toss it in there.
All right. Until next time. Thanks, guys.